Hello, dear readers. Prepare to journey back in time, to an era of knights and castles, of chivalry and, well, let's just say, interesting personal hygiene choices. Yes, we're diving deep into the world of medieval sex and hygiene. Fasten your bodices and gird your loins. It's going to be a bumpy, fragrant ride. Forget what you've seen in the movies. Medieval life was no fairy tale, but it was certainly eventful. Picture this: Europe, roughly between the 5th and 15th centuries. Castles dot the landscape, but don't expect indoor plumbing. Life was tough, short, and often smelly. The Black Death? Yeah, that wasn't exactly helping with the hygiene situation. But amidst the muck and mire, people still found time for love, marriage, and, dare we say, a little bit of fun. Now, medieval romance wasn't all courtly love and sonnets. Marriage was often more about politics and power than passion. Love matches did happen, of course, but they were about as common as a clean pair of socks in a medieval laundry basket. Still, people found ways to express their affections, even if it meant getting creative under the watchful eyes of chaperones. Forget satin sheets and mood lighting. Intimacy in the Middle Ages was often a rustic affair. Think haylofts, barns, and if you were lucky, a somewhat private corner of a crowded house. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. Large families often shared one room, which must have made things interesting. Let's just say that the concept of alone time took on a whole new meaning. Section 5 baths? What baths? Now let's talk hygiene, or rather the lack thereof. Bathing wasn't exactly a daily ritual in the Middle Ages. In fact, some people went their entire lives without a proper scrub. Water was seen as potentially dangerous, possibly carrying disease. Better to smell a bit ripe than risk a dip in the well, eh? Still, people weren't completely averse to cleanliness. They did have their methods, however questionable they might seem today. Section 6. Chamber pots and other medieval necessities. So if baths weren't a thing, what did people use? In the medieval era, personal hygiene was vastly different from what we know today. Bathing was infrequent, and people had to rely on other means to maintain some semblance of cleanliness. Enter the chamber pot, a medieval staple. These pots were essential household items, found in nearly every home, from the grandest castles to the humblest cottages. They came in various shapes and sizes, often made of ceramic or metal. These handy vessels were used for, shall we say, nighttime necessities. When nature called in the middle of the night, one didn't have to venture out into the cold or dark. Instead, they could use the chamber pot conveniently placed under the bed or in a corner of the room. And where did the contents of these pots end up? Well, disposal methods were far from sanitary by today's standards, often tossed right out the window into the street below. Charming, right? This practice was common in many medieval towns and cities, leading to streets that were, quite literally, cesspools of waste. Add to that the lack of proper sewage systems, and you can start to understand the challenges of medieval sanitation. Without underground sewers, waste would accumulate in the streets, creating a breeding ground for disease. And you can start to imagine the, shall we say, unique aroma of a medieval city. The stench was pervasive, a mix of human waste, rotting food, and the general grime of daily life. It's no wonder that medieval cities were often plagued by outbreaks of disease. Despite these challenges, there were efforts to improve public health. Some cities had ordinances requiring residents to clean the streets in front of their homes, and there were even early attempts at waste management, such as designated dumping areas outside city walls. On a personal level, people used herbs and perfumes to mask odors. Lavender, rosemary, and other fragrant plants were popular for their pleasant scents and supposed health benefits. These were often carried in small pouches or strewn around living spaces. Clothing also played a role in hygiene. Linen undergarments were commonly worn and changed more frequently than outer garments. These undergarments absorbed sweat and oils from the skin and were easier to wash than heavier outer clothing. Communal baths did exist, though they were not as common as in other historical periods. Public bathhouses were places where people could wash and socialize, but they were often seen as luxuries or even morally questionable by some. Medical advice of the time also touched on hygiene. Physicians recommended regular washing of hands and face, and some even suggested rinsing the mouth with water or wine to maintain oral health. Life in medieval times was undoubtedly challenging, especially when it came to maintaining cleanliness. Yet, people adapted to their circumstances. using the resources and knowledge available to them. The chamber pot, though primitive by today's standards, was a practical solution to a very real problem. Section 7. The church weighs in. The medieval church, with its towering spires and solemn candlelight, was not just a place of worship, but a powerful institution that influenced every aspect of daily life. The church had a lot to say about matters of the flesh, both in and out of the bedroom. Clergy members would often gather to discuss and dictate the moral compass of society, ensuring that their views on sexuality were well known and strictly adhered to. Sex was for procreation, not recreation, thank you very much. Couples were encouraged to pray together, seeking divine guidance to ensure their union was fruitful and aligned with the church's teachings. And certain practices, well, let's just say they weren't exactly sanctioned by the powers that be. The clergy would often frown upon behaviors they deemed inappropriate, casting a shadow of disapproval over those who dared to deviate from the norm. Think of it as a medieval version of 50 Shades of Forbidden. Love and desire were often cloaked in secrecy, with forbidden romances playing out behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the church. But rules are made to be broken, even in the Middle Ages. Despite the church's stringent regulations, people found ways to indulge in their desires, often engaging in secretive activities that defied the established norms. And broken they were, with varying degrees of discretion. Some were subtle, whispering sweet nothings in the shadows, while others were bold, risking everything for a taste of forbidden fruit. The tension between the church's authority and human desire created a complex tapestry of hidden passions and clandestine encounters. Confessionals became a place where secrets were whispered, sins were confessed, and absolution was sought. The church's influence extended into the very soul of the people, making them grapple with their own morality. Manuscripts and sermons were filled with moral teachings, guiding the faithful on the righteous path. Yet the human heart often strayed, seeking solace in the arms of another, away from the watchful eyes of the clergy. Festivals and gatherings provided a rare opportunity for people to let loose, to dance, to laugh, and sometimes to love. These moments of joy and connection were fleeting, but they offered a glimpse of freedom from the church's ever-present gaze. A secretive glance, a stolen kiss, these were the small rebellions that kept the spirit of love alive in a time of strict moral codes. The church's influence was vast, but the human spirit, with its capacity for love and desire, found ways to endure and thrive. Section 8. Medieval Medicine and the Body. Now, let's talk about the birds and the bees, medieval style. Sex education was, well, non-existent. Knowledge was often passed down through whispers and rumors. And when it came to matters of reproductive health, let's just say that medieval medicine wasn't always the most effective. Still, people muddled through, relying on a mixture of folk remedies, herbal concoctions, and a healthy dose of luck. Section 9. Surprising facts about medieval hygiene. Believe it or not everything about medieval hygiene was awful. For example, people did wash their hands, especially before meals. They just didn't use soap. Instead, they relied on water, ashes, sand, and even urine to scrub away the grime. Hey, whatever works, right? And while bathing was rare, people did change their linen undergarments regularly. Well, relatively regularly anyway. Section 10. Myths and Misconceptions. Throughout history, myths and misconceptions have shaped our understanding of the past. These myths often paint a picture that is far from the truth, leading us to believe in exaggerated or entirely false narratives. Now, let's dispel a few myths. One of the most persistent myths about the medieval period is that people were constantly dirty and unhygienic. While medieval people didn't bathe as often as we do today, they had their own ways of maintaining cleanliness. Bathing was not as frequent, but it was not entirely absent either. They weren't covered in filth 24/7. They cared about cleanliness, and they had public bathhouses in many towns and cities where people could go to wash themselves. They just had different methods and standards. For instance, they used herbs and natural oils to cleanse their bodies and maintain personal hygiene. And while some practices might seem strange or even gross to us today, such as using urine to clean clothes or teeth, these methods were based on the knowledge and resources available at the time. We have to remember that they made sense in the context of their time. The medieval period was a time of limited scientific understanding, and people did the best they could with the information they had. So, the next time you're feeling smug about your indoor plumbing and daily shower, consider the ingenuity and resourcefulness of medieval people. They managed to maintain hygiene without the modern conveniences we take for granted. Spare a thought for the folks in the Middle Ages. They faced numerous challenges, from limited access to clean water to the lack of advanced sanitation systems. They were just doing their best with what they had. Despite the hardships, they developed various methods to stay clean and healthy, showing remarkable resilience and adaptability. Public bathhouses were common in medieval Europe, especially in larger towns and cities. These bathhouses were social hubs where people could relax, clean themselves, and socialize. Additionally, medieval people used a variety of herbal remedies and natural products for personal hygiene. For example, they used rosemary, lavender, and other herbs to create fragrant oils and soaps. Dental hygiene was also important. People used twigs, cloths, and even crushed shells to clean their teeth. While these methods might seem primitive, they were effective in maintaining oral health. Clothing hygiene was another area where medieval people showed ingenuity. They used natural detergents like soapwort and urine to clean their clothes, ensuring they remained as clean as possible. Health practices in the Middle Ages were based on the medical knowledge of the time. While some methods were misguided, others were surprisingly effective and laid the groundwork for modern medicine. Community health was also a concern. Medieval towns and cities implemented various public health measures, such as waste disposal systems and regulations to prevent the spread of disease. The resilience and adaptability of medieval people are truly remarkable. They faced numerous challenges, but found ways to overcome them and maintain a certain level of cleanliness and health. Modern misconceptions about the Middle Ages often overlook these achievements. By understanding the context and the limitations of the time, we can appreciate the efforts and ingenuity of medieval people. Re-evaluating historical narratives allows us to learn from the past and gain a more accurate understanding of history. It helps us appreciate the complexities and nuances of different eras. So the next time you hear a myth about the Middle Ages, take a moment to consider the historical context. Understanding the past helps us appreciate the present and the progress we've made. Reflecting on historical progress reminds us of the resilience and ingenuity of our ancestors. It shows us that, despite the challenges, people have always found ways to adapt and thrive. Let's celebrate the resilience and achievements of people throughout history. By dispelling myths and misconceptions, we can honor their legacy and learn valuable lessons for the future. Section 11. Subscribe now for more. Well, that's all for our whirlwind tour of medieval sex and hygiene. We hope you enjoyed this fragrant journey through time. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating forays into the past. Until next time, stay curious, stay clean, or don't, we're not judging, and keep exploring.